It's not working.
Is it working now? I forgot to hit unmute. Are we good now? Are we good? All right. Sorry. Sorry, my bad, everyone. So we're just gonna do some intros in the room right now. I'm sorry for the people online. I forgot to unmute. So I'm gonna just start from the side of the room. I know I would you like to start? Just introduce yourself and company and
Yeah. My name is Olu. I work for Korea Brand, but then I was deployed to LGES.
okay, great.
Eric Jones, scheduler for all construction.
Sean Nebo, for Crispin, project scheduler, chapter secretary.
Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Andrew Grusnick. I'm with V1 Consulting. I'm a program manager and I'm vice president on the board.
I'm Tom Rich, I'm with Consumers Energy, I'm the principal scheduler there, and I'm on the board.
Phil Bunnell, I'm from ACM, program scheduler, and I'm on board member.
Alex DeShaw, ACM, project scheduler.
Matt Frost, ACM, P650.
Jeff Taylor, ACM project manager.
Jim Krebs, ACM, I make sure Phil works.
I'm pleased to answer. I'm glad you're all working. I appreciate that.
Chris Ostermiller for ACM manager.
Jeff Ostermiller, ACM, scheduling, and board member.
I'll hold off on you guys because you guys will probably do your little intro on your intro slide, but I'll just introduce myself. I'm Jason Marentet. I am the section president and I work for ACM. So I'm going to quickly, since we have a good panel, I'm going to quickly hand it off to Andrew, the vice president. He's going to do his little intro. So thank everyone for joining.
Thanks.
All right, we've got an exciting panel discussion queued up here, so just get the presentation up here. Okay, so we're going to start by introducing our panel members. I'll say thanks to everyone for showing up. I'm really happy we had a good turnout with the snowy weather, and our panelists were, so I think everyone made a decent drive or has to make a decent drive tonight, so thanks a lot. So before we kick into it, let's maybe brief introduction, name who you work for, and then maybe one or two things within your role that you kind of like consider yourself to be a bit of an expert at, or things maybe you have particular interest in, and estimating, project management, whatever it may be.
Right.
So
My name is Dan Lindenmuth. I am an estimator with Walbridge. Been in the industry since 2018. Started out in the K-12 market and have since transitioned into the battery manufacturing and then the data center market. Part of what I really enjoy doing is taking bids from all of our subcontractor partners and then figuring out who's got a complete scope, mixing and matching to see what provides the best value for our clients. And then I've gotten really good at learning all the power and functionality of Excel.
cool.
Awesome. Thanks.
Glenn?
Cool. My name is Glenn Frank. I'm a senior estimator with the Chrisman Company. I've been there for about 3 years. I've been around town at other jobs as well. I'm also the president of the American Society of Professional Estimators, Chapter 17 out of Detroit. And I'm seeing all of you guys at some of our events as well. We're doing a bid day in a couple of months, so I'm hoping to see you all then. Outside of that, really my role is to guide our estimating teams as we look at projects and then support project planning by forecasting our costs through each of the design stages. Typically, we'll look at cost models, then on to schematic design development, and then we always do a little check estimate at CDs, even though we're just trying to tell the owner if we're projecting that it'll be if it'll be on once we get to the bid day. The only other thing that I do is also to lead the value engineering process to keep the jobs on budget and maximize the efficiency for the owner. So
Thanks, Glenn. We should talk about co-sponsoring some events, get the numbers up.
Great.
Dave?
Hey everyone, Dave Pollock. I'm the estimating manager at Cuckoo, specifically for our Airport America division. I handle all of our airport product line estimates and pricing, as well as our AGV product line, which we use largely in, manufacturing, automotive, here in Michigan. I've been with the company for 11 years. I spent most of my time before estimating in our controls engineering group. So I spent a lot of time out on our job sites, commissioning our baggage systems, making sure your luggage makes your plane. And I would say that's probably my biggest strength as an estimator, is kind of knowing what to look for in our testing and commissioning and scheduling durations, pitfalls, things to look out for in specs that, can become gotchas for us. Yeah, happy to be here. First meeting for me. Very excited.
It doesn't matter how much time we allocate in schedules for commissioning. It's
Never.
you can
Triple it.
chop it in half at least at the end. Right?
Last one in.
You're just gonna have to work 7 days a week, 24 hours for the next.
Good thing we get overtime.
Yeah. So before we jump into the questions, when we get a group together, obviously a lot of diverse backgrounds here. And so when we met, we talked about like, hey, how can we have a conversation that focuses on the experience of each of you, but can make it applicable for everyone in the room. So kind of what we try to do is identify some problems that the panelists have encountered in their individual companies or industries. And then we're going to talk about how they solve those problems. And hopefully that's educational for the rest of us to say hey, maybe we can utilize some of these strategies. So kind of set it up. But yeah, to start with, what types of estimating uncertainty do you encounter in your company or industry? We'll just, start with Dan, and we'll just go down the line, kind of 5 minutes each. I think if anyone has a point or a question, I don't think we need to wait till the end. We can just kind of put your hand up, and we'll dive into it and keep it interactive. Cool.
All right. So I would say one of the biggest things that we've been running into is the subcontractor capacity. There's more mega jobs now that are astronomically larger than what I ever thought I would deal with. That you only have a certain number of subcontractors that are, one, qualified to do that scale of work. And then two, if everyone goes to that same bunch, you kind of start to run into issues with, you can't have all your eggs in one basket. And I don't know about you guys, but I've dealt with subs that say they can take every single job under the sun. That's great that they think that, but from a risk standpoint, that's probably not the wisest decision to make. Another thing that compounds that is labor shortages. There are certain trades where you're competing with other mega jobs in close proximity amongst even the same company for the same bodies, the same labor. And then you have other competition, other contractors, other general contractors. So you kind of have to find a way to get them to want to work for your company, whether that be on-site amenities. Sometimes the subcontractors that are hiring that labor force directly, they will provide incentives, overscale pay, other things to try to get and retain that labor force. Because the hardest thing about working in some of these markets is you want guys that get really good at what they do and then keep them. You don't want to have to retrain somebody every single time you go to do a job, because then you're losing productivity, not as efficient, and it can cause other issues that wouldn't have happened if you'd been able to retain that same labor force. So that's probably been one of the biggest things that we've been dealing with on our front with the larger scale projects.
That's interesting. Being an airport guy, I definitely, there's a steep learning curve to some of those trades, and yeah, I've seen that a lot past.
You probably see a lot of the same faces, a lot of the same names.
Yeah.
You have guys that go from one airport job to the next, to just follow where those jobs are.
Yeah.
So
we've been hearing that the data centers are taking all the good electricians, so that's why we keep
all the electric.
Oh,
Good, bad, whatever.
Yeah, that's great. It's great. It's good feedback. Glenn, what?
Yeah, I came up with a little list and just this isn't necessarily what we're dealing with right now, but over my career, you'll deal with bad drawings, incomplete specs, or sometimes when I say bad drawings, it's not just that it's incomplete. Sometimes people will draw things that it's like it's clear that that's not what their real intention is. So, I can give some way that we've gotten around that in the past. Outside of that, there's market conditions, kind of alluding to what Dan was talking about in terms of your estimate. I talked earlier about around COVID, we weren't able to get a lot of the same trades. You weren't able to get the material. We had a real bear of a time. And so we went through a period of wicked escalation. It was very difficult. And then after COVID, after that was over, then we started experiencing de-escalation as prices came down to where they were supposed to be. And from an owner's perspective, they don't like that either, because what'll happen is we do an estimate, we're going to tell them it's going to cost you this much. And a lot of times owners will have to make decisions of, what will I cut out of my program in order to meet the funds that I've got? They don't like when there's a bid day and they have 20% still left on the table. Then they're angry. I could have gotten the Taj Mahal, but now you gave me this outhouse. So, it's tough. Outside of that, other things, scope creep that can happen where, we'll give them an estimate and then at that CD level, suddenly something will show up that I wasn't expecting the stadium to be in this project, whatever, things can show up late. Other things involve like new unknown products. Just personally, as an estimator, if you're running across something that you've never done before, kind of like what you were talking about. I know for me personally, I was doing some historic estimating, and we ran across some items that I hadn't done a ton of work with. And so I was reaching out, trying to there's only a few contractors locally that are able to do some of the trades, speaking specifically about the marble at the fountain, at the Belle Isle fountain. There's only one place that you can get it from, and there's only a couple of contractors that are really set up to do that kind of thing. So, cost was an issue. So I had to work really hard to try to get where we needed to be for it. The last thing I'd say is schedule unknowns. The more that we can lock down what's your projected start date and how long do you think this project is going to be, that impacts our estimate in terms of what we think the total cost is going to be. So that, a contractor can do something for a certain price today that in 5 years it's going to be very different. So those are the things that we have to work with.
Kind of like playing into if you're using union trades or just annual raises, having those baked into the figures.
Yeah, right.
Because if, like you said, doing the work today could be a very different cost than doing it 18 months from now.
Typically what we see is 3%. It usually goes 3 to 4% every year. And like I say, there are times when it gets out of that norm, but it's always at least going to go up 3 to 4%. But if we see something coming in the future, like the tariffs hit about a year ago, and that was an example where we started trying to account for that. And it turned out at the end of the day, it didn't actually end up impacting our projects the way that we thought that it was going to. So,
well, I remember when those tariffs hit, because we were in the process of trying to close a bid.
Right.
We were closing the bid on Friday. The tariffs got announced, I think, Wednesday or Thursday, and we're sitting there just like, what do we do?
Yeah. What did you do?
You know exactly what we did. I don't even need to say that.
Right. Mm-hmm. And you were fine.
We ended up being fine, but at the moment we had no idea.
Right.
It could have been an astronomical cost to us.
Mm-hmm. But you ate it.
Of course we do.
So I'll just add on a few that I had, kind of specific to airports, but for me, all the time I spent on site, a big thing I always think about is system availability. So working on brownfield jobs, airports are like basically a plant, right? They're in production all the time. There's minimum amounts of downtime. So you got to shoehorn all your work into a 4-hour window. Sometimes it's advertised as a 6-hour window, but you really know it's a 3-hour window.
Mm-hmm.
So making sure everybody's on the same page about what's attainable in those windows to build your schedule. Again, dealing with brownfield sites all the time, existing conditions, getting people out there during the bid phase, making sure we're taking, scans, pictures, whatever we can, asking the right questions. For us, we have a lot of specific specifications that are kind of consistent job to job. A lot of times they have maybe outdated language in them that we don't really follow because we know we're not going to be held to it, but it's always a risk. And every once in a while you do get called on it, and then you get in a bad position there. So that's a tough one to always look at. kind of in the same vein as ambiguity in wording. We've seen things where there's some specs will say dedicated, like a dedicated person for XYZ versus a designated person for XYZ. And then you get into the job and they're like, oh, you can't have your site superintendent do this. It says it needs to be a dedicated person as opposed to a designated person. So just things like that, trying to get clarity. And I think kind of everything all of us have talked about is probably things you can kind of CYA with RFIs. But everybody gets, you only have limited amount of time in a bid to get those out. And, it's almost like the ability to have all that history under your belt where that you got to get them out early and the things to look for. So it's hard to list these off without also answering how.
I know. That was good.
I'm gonna shut up now.
Right.
I'm surprised, I don't think anyone brought this up, but I think about this a lot. What about like, the client you're bidding to? Does that ever play into your bid?
I think it's more of a sales thing.
That's more of a
than
sales
an estimating thing.
Yeah,
I see that with our AGB market. I see that a lot where we know more where, what a client is worth or is willing to pay for something. Kind of gives us the flexibility. Or if we know we're going to get, they want a bunch of freebies, so you bake in a little extra so you can give it to them for free.
yeah.
But
Yeah. And I guess, not so much the ink, like what I was thinking is, we would work with some general contractors when I was at Ifuku, and it'd be like, they run a really tight ship. We know we're going to get by like on our base pricing with them versus this other guy that like, man, every time we work with them, it's a dumpster fire and it costs us twice as much money, and I do remember making some adjustments, and we better maybe not to the base bid, but adding that additional contingency to make sure that we're covered.
Yeah, if you're doing a hard bid, absolutely, you have to do that. When I worked in Chicago, I remember doing that. We usually had 3 prices. We had one for our preferred clients and it wasn't as though we were looking to punish the people. It was really, it came down to, we know that when we work for this guy, it's going to go really smooth. We're going to we're going to make money with this guy. This guy will do okay. And then this guy, oh my God, he's going to be awful. He's going to be terrible. Right. He's not going to give us the time. He's not going to give us the access. The project's going to be a mess. We're going to have to fight through all of these things. Its quality control is terrible. So, they're not holding the trades before us to the specifications. So we're going to have to clean up their mess before we can start doing our work. So all of those things can play into it for sure.
Any other thoughts on types of estimating uncertainty that you come across before we start talking about the solutions? All right, how do we adjust them? Start, Dave, maybe we'll.
Oh, sure, snake draft kind of thing. So I think, again, this is kind of tough because like my answers are kind of in relation to the order I put things, but I talked about system availability for working on these brownfield sites. I kind of alluded to it towards the end of what I was talking about earlier, but anecdotal evidence from similar areas or projects, kind of doing postmortems with the team, trying to figure out, hey, what was this really like? Did you get that type of access? How was working with, this person? We've been working out in Seattle for 10 years almost. It's really easy to get feedback from a large number of different people involved with those projects to get prepared for, the next one. Another thing I mentioned is, and this is, I think, in general to all risks or uncertainty, is making sure that when the project is initiated for execution, that those risks are relayed to the team. So that allows them to try to mitigate them. I mean, we can only do so much on the estimating front if you have to kind of establish, how much money am I willing to put towards something I don't know is actually going to happen. The best thing you can do after that is tell the team, hey, this is something we're worried about. We want to make sure you guys get ahead of it or mitigate it however you can. My next one was about the existing conditions. I said just getting access early to the site for site walks, RFIs. In some cases for us, we like to just, if we look at existing conditions and we don't like them, we just budget for a full rebuild, tear it all out, put it all back in. Because sometimes people think, oh, this is great, you can reuse this. And you say, actually, it costs more money to get a guy to tear it apart and replace all the bearings on a conveyor and rehang it than it does to just tear it out and put a whole new one in. So kind of knowing those things helps. As far as spec requirements that we think shouldn't apply or are antiquated. We actually have had working sessions with some of our owners reps on establishing or kind of critiquing some of the frequent heavy hitters where we're always asking for RFIs on clarifying the language to get those put into their specs and updated to just avoid that entirely. I don't obviously think that's applicable to everyone, but if you can do something like that, it's pretty awesome. And then the last thing I had was about the ambiguity and the wording. We actually had an initiative started, I think like 6 months ago, where we're actually using AI to like read through our specifications and bid documents for certain like heavy hitter, consistent gotchas that we'll have. So we've kind of talked to different groups in engineering and project management on, okay, what are the things that burn us in jobs? Well, when they say, when these specific words are used and talks about XYZ part of the specification, we want to avoid that. So it's really just we're not using it to automate anything as much as it is like an advanced search tool that allows us to crunch through the spec a lot quicker than just, brute force reading through it and then maybe missing something. That's kind of in its infancy. I won't say that's like a full-fledged solution, but I think that that's something that I would like to use more as we kind of continue on with new projects. I know that's the new craze, right? AI. So, but yeah, that's all I got.
What?
You take all yours, Glenn?
I mean, it goes to part of my answer for it. It goes to what Dave started with, where he talked about going to the architect and asking all of his questions, getting his RFIs out quickly. Because generally, when we're estimating, if I'm estimating a school, if I'm estimating a hospital, I'm only going to have X amount of time. I'm only going to have 3 weeks to get fully understanding the project to the point that I can give a good estimate to the owner. So within that 3 weeks, early on, I've got to get all my questions. I've got to figure out what's ambiguous, what questions could I have, as well as if I'm seeing something in there, I need to reach out to the trades in order to ask them how much it's going to be. That marble that I talked about, I went to those two immediately, the 2 contractors that we knew of that could do it, just trying to get a handle on what it was going to cost to get that material and get it built and get it sent to the site and everything. That was tough. Outside of that, we're always tracking market conditions just to see, are we escalating? Is there something in the future? Is there tariffs? Is there something that's going to happen down the road? Are they going to build another data center? Are they going to do that? If they do, we're going to have to really struggle to get electricians. We should probably add a little bit in order to pay extra to be able to lure them to our job instead of going to the data center. Yeah, really, then that pretty well covers most of it. Most of what it is that we're working with is just trying to mitigate those things and trying to get it taken care of as quickly as possible, so that generally the trades are going to need time to answer those questions. The architect's going to need a little bit of time to answer their ambiguities, so that we can know, so that we can find out, and we can react to it with our estimate and give less uncertainty.
That's great.
Yeah, building on what Glenn just said about calling that sub that knew all about that marble, picking up the phone and talking to the trades is key, especially early on in the process. It gets them engaged, lets them know that they're a priority for you to talk to, and they're the experts. I'm not an expert in drywall, concrete, steel, any of that. I've picked up on things throughout the years when it comes to the little minor nuances, details that can really swing the cost of the project and the schedule. And there might be some material that you think is, oh, it's just run of the mill, something or other. And then you talk to something like, oh yeah, that's going to take you 2 years to get. I'm not going to know that unless I pick up the phone and talk to them. And then something else that goes back to your bad drawings. I'm sure you guys probably see it. Copy paste specs all the time. Like you'll have a spec that's got some product listed that was discontinued 10, 15 years ago. And unless you submit a substitution request, and based on how the spec's written, it might be like, this is who you can use or approved equal, but they don't list who the approved equal is. So then you're flying blind. What do I do? I can't get it, so I have to know to ask that question, get that approved in the bid process. So that way I'm not taking on unnecessary risk. And then going on to the labor market thing, we always vet our subs pretty thoroughly during the process to make sure that they are one qualified, competent. And we try to talk and be like, hey, what's your plan for staffing this? Are you bringing travelers? You using local guys? How are you going to execute this project? Because at the end of the day, everyone wants to get the project done. And the biggest failure you can have is failing on a project because that's a reputational hit. And it could burn a bridge with good subcontractor, good owner, and then word of mouth. You don't want your name tarnished.
You ever go on a bid where you don't get a price from a key trade? Like so the bids that come in are all from like a selection of potentially bad subcontractors or unknown subcontractors?
We got no sub bids last month on a job that I won't name. And we just made a no bid it. Yeah. We were lucky it was a small job, but we didn't have enough time to turn it around and there was no sub interest.
Yep.
Yeah, it happens.
Yep.
It sure does. And sometimes like Glenn was talking about with some historical data, we've had to dive into our historical database before to be like, all right, we think we can buy it for this. You punch it in, and then you just buy it out.
Yeah, we had talked about doing that too in this situation. It was such a small job that we decided we didn't really, but that was my initial thought was like, well, we can give them a price that will definitely cover a sub, but
that's the big red button.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then so kind of the third part of this is like, so we've got problems and solutions. How do we come back and reflect on the effectiveness of those solutions or try to learn and grow from the oopses? In my experience, I think this is probably where a lot of firms fall down a little bit, is keeping good historical records and actually using them moving forward. It's tough. And kind of being in a couple of different firms where you've got internal resources. I don't think having been on the general contractor side, I didn't experience this as much, but in a company where you're doing design, engineering, manufacturing, there's a tendency for people to build to available projects, right? So rather than blowing through a budget on a project where your budget's used up, you start billing to the next job, which totally screws up your historicals, right? But that aside, how do you learn from your mistakes or capitalize on your wins?
Stake drafting this?
Yeah.
So a lot of times when it's scope related item, you get a phone call as soon as you find out in the field that it's an issue. And then you talk through solutions and then you relay that out to the rest of the team saying, hey, we ran into this issue on project X. We're bidding projects Y, Z, AA. Let's make sure that we have a solution in place since we missed the boat on the first one. Just kind of constant communication. We try to get out to the job sites as often as we can, maybe not as often as we would like to be. But whenever we're on site, we're always talking to whether it's the superintendents, the project managers, project engineers, project coordinator, schedulers.
Mm-hmm.
What did we get right? What did we get wrong? What worked well? What didn't work well? What are some ideas for how we can improve things in the future? And then just continual learning because designs are constantly changing.
Mm-hmm.
Projects are always developing throughout the process.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if you've ever bid a project where what you build is exactly what you bid on bid day. But I know I haven't done it yet.
Not yet.
Someday.
Do you, and maybe someone's going to talk about this, but what's the process to update the kind of your pricing? Is it like someone on an annual basis or a quarterly basis is looking at the market and updating pricing, or is it sometimes a reaction to the buyout process?
So I would say it's a little bit of both. We do a lot of outreach with our subcontractor market suppliers. Getting information on how stuff's trending.
Mm-hmm.
Like is lumber up or down this quarter? Is conduit up or down? Is price staying pretty steady? We get information on lead times like switchgear. That's becoming a very hot commodity. Back in think it was like 2019, 2021, that time frame. I remember working at my former company, they actually redesigned a building from joist to wide flange. Because they couldn't, the joist would have delayed the project like 18 months. So really, it's just talking to your market and talking to the experts, knowing that you're being humble enough to say, hey, I'm not the expert, I don't know everything. Let me talk to the people that live this and breathe this every day.
And then I guess how, well, let's just go through it. I don't want to steal anyone's.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
You're actually one of mine.
The biggest way that our company improves the estimate quality, and one of the reasons why I'm at where I'm at right now is what we do. I talked about, we do each of the design phases, cost model, SDE, DD, and then we do a check at the CD. And so we create this budget basically. We create our bid tabs based on this is what we're projecting it's going to be. Our project managers then go out to bid, and once they get those bids, they do post bids with all the contractors, and then they kind of lay out here are the people that we're going to be contracting, and here's the values. Once we have that, I can take that and compare it back to what was my estimate, and I can see where all the deltas are, where were we different, and I can come up with why were we different. Usually, so we do an analysis. It takes a little extra time. It's an extra step that isn't necessary to the process, but at the same time, it doesn't it helps the owner in the long run, but in the short term, it doesn't. But what it does is it allows us to then learn from it. If I'm working with the school district, I just did this school, so it came in 10% under. I have to be real careful on the next one that one is projected now to be under what I had originally on the other job. So we do that on each of the jobs that we do, and the estimator is held to that standard of trying to be within 1% of that CD check number that we came up with. So.
That's awesome. So then just procedurally, like when you kick off a new bid, is it yours, or there's someone in the firm who's responsible to like go back and pull those historicals? Or is each estimator kind of come into that pool of historical?
Each estimator does it for their own project, and then we publish it between nationally with all of our estimators, so that all of us can then look and see where are the bids coming in. And so at any time I can take a look at what everybody else's jobs are coming in. So maybe I've got an MOB coming up. What other MOBs have we done recently? How did the bids come in? And I can then look at what was their estimate and where were they at, so I can try to start projecting where would our current MOB be in that same area.
So Glenn, when you do that process, how do you account for like scope creep and design development in your analysis?
What we do is we tend to have a bit of escalation. We'll throw in a bit of escalation during that process, but hopefully by the time that you've gotten to that DD, and especially at that CD stage, there's absolutely no
it's all shaking itself out, right?
Yes, exactly. But during SD, you'll have an amount of escalation. At DD, we're generally half of what that amount would have been, and then by the time you're at CD, then that's gone away. It's just disappeared. So. Great question. Dave.
All right, well, I'll have to find something here. After you guys took all the easy stuff.
Should be the third guy.
It's a snake.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, obviously, so we evaluate against all our actuals. So once a month I'll pull reports against, we call it our ETC. So we'll have all of our main buckets that we evaluate against the original budget versus the actuals. But the thing that's tricky about that is obviously there's nuance to everything. You see a huge deficit in a job, and as soon as you talk to someone about it, they got a really good reason why they went, 30% over budget on XYZ. So that's a challenging part, is engaging with the project team and trying to get to the root of an issue and find out if it is an estimating problem or if it was a project execution problem. And I think having those conversations also has led me to kind of going back to a number 2 solution is one of the things I really want to kind of task myself with in our organization is having better kind of handoff materials from the estimating team to the project team. So they're aware of, a lot of times, you've just got everything in big buckets. I don't know how everyone does it, but we've got material, labor, warehouse, there's a few different buckets, but they're not incredibly granular. We don't show, in, our material budget explicitly that's handed off to project management, that we have X amount of dollars allocated for network switches or specific pieces of equipment. That all exists, they can find that, but they're not all necessarily privy to that. So having, some more granularity there so people can see, where they can grab money from, where there's opportunities for savings. Because a lot of times you just look at the overall budget, you go, oh yeah, I've got tons of money. And then you're 22 months into a 28-month project and you're going, uh-oh. So I think that was just me tying back to kind of an improvement I'd like to, make for our team, is just better handover material, especially for opportunities. If we're baking in risk into our pricing, making that explicit to the team, hey, we might have a couple extra bucks here if you need it for a rainy day, and not letting them have to kind of, get concerned about it until they figure it out themselves. Yeah, that was the big thing. Just alerting the team early of opportunities to save early. Really, for me, I think handover material is going to be a big one. We use SAP to reevaluate all of our buy parts quarterly. So especially on the AGV side, because it's a lot of electrical components for us. We've got gyros and processors and things that fluctuate pretty heavily with market conditions. We were reevaluating those quarterly and updating those. We also escalate them, add material overhead.
Did the tariffs impact you a lot or not?
More so on that side of things. But we had some, I don't think it came to a head ever where we had to, address it, but we had some legalese in a lot of our proposals about, any changes in tariffs will be, adjusted to the customer at a reciprocal rate or whatever. But like you guys were talking about, none of that, a lot of that did never really pan out.
Right.
But yeah, that did definitely change our pricing and our books quite a bit.
I was saying.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all I got.
Cool.
Andrew,
Yeah.
so just a question, because David's brought it up a couple of times. I'd love to hear the other panelists. This concept, because not working in GC, this concept of a lot goes into your estimate, right? It's not just adding up numbers and all that. Can you talk about that, how you do communicate that to the execution? Something I'm not that familiar with, so that, obviously they have a number, they're gonna run with that number and run the job, but I presume you've got to share what your thoughts went into that estimate, and just what's the mechanism to communicate that to the execution group?
When you say the execution group, do you mean our internal
Yeah, your
project
internal
managers
team,
that
right?
are going to be the
But,
people
I mean,
that build the job?
And I've seen contractors where estimators become the project manager and they gotta
Right.
live with their estimate, but I'm assuming you guys are estimating all the time and you're handing it off to a project
Yes,
team?
that's
So
exactly.
how's that communication link between what you've thought about for those 3 weeks, 24 hours a day, 26 hours a day, whatever many hours you need,
Mhm.
and then get that to the team so they know what to look for?
I can speak personally for me.
Yeah.
I'm in contact with our project managers throughout that estimating process, and I'm asking questions. A lot of the questions, a lot of that uncertainty, I'm putting to him to ask him, what's your thoughts on this? What do you plan on doing? What's the current condition at that school? What's the, what do you see at that hospital? So I'll ask him that, and I'll tell him what I'm working with, and I'll tell him if there's uncertainty, I'll try to communicate to him, hey, this is leading me to have some concern. What do you think about it? Because ultimately, like you say, he's the one that's going to own it.
Right,
He's the one who's gonna have to buy it out, but also he's the one that's gonna have to deal with that uncertainty, which may or may not go away once he contracts it. Just because he contracts it, speaking to our conversation earlier,
Yeah, exactly.
it doesn't mean that it's gonna turn out the way that you hoped at bid day. So
Right.
we try to stay in contact. So at the turnover, yes, we're turning over our numbers, we're turning over that information, but through the estimating process, I'm trying to stay in as good a communication as I can with the project manager. That way, they can at least have a good understanding of what we're seeing and what he should do, the things that he may need to be concerned about as he gets into it. And honestly, it's great because he'll tell me some of the things that he sees that he's concerned about as well, so that we're working more as a team.
Yeah, that's like the best case scenario, right? Is that it reminds me of for all the schedulers is like when you put together a baseline, you don't get any feedback from the execution team, and then suddenly they've got a million things that they don't like about it. They can turn it over, right? It's like engage with me early, help build the plan. I'll do the legwork, but you help build.
Right. We'll both be owners for this. So let's move forward that way.
Similar, Dan?
Yeah, so to build on what Glenn said, so Glenn puts the numbers together, then hands it off. I actually don't hand it off till I've bought the job out. So I'm involved through the buyout process and during the pre-bid process, bidding process, and then buyout and procurement. Our site team's involved. They're giving us feedback. They're saying, hey, why are we buying this scope with this guy? We should be putting it with this guy. It makes more sense to put it here. Just little stuff like that. So constantly evolving what our scopes of work are. Talking through the site team with different logistical issues, because not all these sites are gonna have unlimited laydown area. You're gonna have to be phasing your logistics, moving stuff around, because you might be like, all right, yeah, we can lay all of our stuff down here. This building's not going for another 2 years. And then 6 weeks later, it's like, oh yeah, they want to start that in 2 months. So you kind of have to start, you have to have that in the back of your mind at all times, that every construction site is a living, breathing entity. Changes every day. They grow up and then break your heart when you're on the way.
So many broken hearts.
When you talk about using AI as like, advanced search functions, for example, are you keeping like spreadsheet libraries of different terms for like an existing AI to search for it? So you can like upload a PDF or something of a contract or a spreadsheet and say, look for this list of terms. And will it like kind of, not only will it show you where they are, but kind of does it give
Summary,
like, an interpretation of what?
Yeah. Yes, exactly what you said. So, and I didn't like come up with this way. I was part of a different, like company initiative team. And one of the other teams came up with this idea where they would basically give them kind of a boilerplate spec to use as like the gold standard. And then kind of figured out a bunch of different prompts to use to basically ask like, hey, tell me about what are the requirements for, variable frequency drives in this project. And it would spit out like a nice synopsis to avoid having to sift through 8 different sections of the spec that talk about the requirements for variable frequency drives. Again, we haven't like fully, this is like a work in progress. It's not something I would say we're even, fully trusting at this point, but it's like an interesting development that I think would be really, really cool. Because I mean, over and over on these jobs, every job that I've worked on has had some sort of gotcha where I feel like something like that would have been a lot more foolproof than, an estimator reading through a 900-page document. So yeah, I'm excited about it. Like I said, it's not like fully fledged, but it seems to, we've trialed it. It's not replacing our ability to still like search through it by hand. But the idea is at some point, once we do it, a dozen times and we feel good enough about what we get from the model, that we'll trust it enough to maybe save us the time of scrolling through. So
Right, like if it takes you from having to review every single spec section down to just 2 or 3,
yeah,
that's hours, if not days, that you're saving.
yeah. Well, and it's tough too, because it's the reality is you start looking at these same ones over and over again, and you kind of phone it in to a degree. You're
Right.
starting to skip over things. Oh, I've read this before, and you're not catching everything. So it's I wouldn't say we're infallible by any means.
Yeah, it looks like boilerplate except for that one.
Yeah.
term.
Oh, wow, this is the first job ever where they changed
That one word.
Right.
Yeah.
That reminds me, there was a project where so we'd been through, several rounds of kind of iterations of the boilerplate owner contract. And on the last iteration, they changed the contract duration and no one caught it, like shaved like 4 months out of a 24-month project, and we signed it, right? It was like, yeah, it was buried, and it wasn't like in an apparent part of the contract. It was kind of buried in the T's and C's.
God, that's rotten.
Yeah. We actually had a pretty good kind of, it almost went to claim, and we had a pretty good argument, it was like, the
That's a
intent
bait and
was
switch.
clear, but
Mhm.
one thing that I forget, someone brought it up about engaging the designers. So I just kind of finished up almost 2 years on the design side, which was really boring, but one of the things that was interesting is people, sometimes firms would engage us outside of a bid period, of course, and say, hey, can we come and meet with you? I think I'm a little surprised it doesn't happen more often because it seems like the design companies I've interacted with are more than willing to do it. It's just that it's like everyone's busy, and when it's not top of mind, you just don't do it. And both the company I worked for and other companies I've interacted with do seem fairly open, especially nowadays, to like, hey, how can we improve our specification, or how can we improve to help keep prices down? Because they're in a lot of cases being judged on that now as well, right? Different contract mechanisms, things like that. But yeah, that's kind of one recommendation I have is like find a chance to sit down with those designers that you work with a lot and see if you can pick their brain to help improve your pricing. Or even maybe get them to ease up on some requirements that are unreasonably driving your pricing. The other thing is, I was surprised at times when, so we would have like an early, so before you're in a formal kind of bid cone of silence type thing, maybe you've got an early solicitation, like a request for qualifications, and then that ends, and there's a period of time before the request for bid starts. Um, I was sometimes surprised we didn't get more inquiries, because it's kind of fair game. You can pick these, if you pick the right people at the right time. Like I would want to, because sometimes when you're on the design side, the holes sometimes in your design or in your specification, and you're like, please ask me about this so I can explain it to you so that we don't get some screwed up bids,
Right.
and people wouldn't call, or it would call, and I'd you kind of want to lead them there, and they're going to ask the question that seems obvious to you. And so anyway,
I
just
would
reach out to
say
the
on
designers.
on the flip side of that though, Andrew, sometimes we specifically avoid asking certain RFIs because we don't want the other bidders
Yeah,
to
right.
get the answer.
Strategic, yeah.
Secret sauce.
We know the answer. We don't want them to know the answer
Sure.
because that makes us less competitive potentially, because
Mhm.
they're going to lower their price. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't-
Never happened.
I know for me personally, the better relationship that I can have with the project manager at the architect firm, the better off I'm gonna be, because then it's just easier for me to get answers, for me to get information, for that information to flow properly. I know we've recently had an architect that we've done a ton of work with, and so some of the higher ups within my company met with a few of the partners from their company and really had a day-long meeting just to go over what can we do, what can we do better. Both sides were asking that question, and then both sides were able to come back and kind of give, here's what we came up with. This is where they're at. These are the things that they were looking for from you, and these are the things that we need to do better, and these are the things that we told them we need and that they've agreed to try to provide in the future.
Yeah,
So
it's great. It's like it, just like the general contractors have opinions on the subcontractors. The designers certainly have perspectives on the
very much.
generals, right? And like
Mhm.
these guys kick me under the bus every time we
Right,
work together.
right.
These
And-
guys work collaboratively, right?
Yeah, the goal isn't to have this animosity or anything like that. The goal is to be able to work together. I mean, there's always going to be a friction between the design and the cost. There always is going to be, but the more that we can alleviate that and just become part of the same team, the better off the owner is going to be at the end of the day. So,
Everyone has one goal in mind, right?
Yep.
Happy client.
mhm.
Happy client, successful project.
Yep.
And how do you guys really deal with new technology that's coming up? Like, I don't know how many data centers have been built in Michigan, probably one, right? The one going on in Saline.
Potential. I have no idea, honestly.
And, how do you then work that into something that you can price and bid competitively, both on, the construction part of it, the time, that data center is gonna be done in 28 or something like that. It's a lot of money to cram into a couple, 3 years. So how do you deal with that, or even as it changes during the time frame that you got the spec to the time you bid it? Technology's different.
Yeah, so I think a lot of what you're talking about there, some of that stuff is owner furnished equipment. Depending on how that gets contracted, how all that, the project organization gets set up. Sometimes they will have deals directly with some vendors for stuff like that. But a lot of times they're saying, hey, this was our initial design. We came up with this better design. Can we intercept it and not delay our turnover? What's the cost? You're doing a lot of what ifs. You're always reactive.
Good enough to get, good, have an impact where you're going to at the end of the day.
Right.
I would agree, though, that a lot of times it is owner furnished, especially when it comes to like, we do a lot of, all our airport jobs, a big portion of it is server equipment for the, reporting and SCADA and everything for the systems. And the owners typically provide it. And with these jobs being 3-4 years long, they won't purchase the equipment for, 18 months. And then half the time they're still obsolete within 3 years. I mean, we're doing this project in Seattle. I was out there in 2019, and this third part of the project that's kicking off right now. In 2027, they're going to replace all the servers we installed in 2020. So that stuff gets churned through pretty quick. Good for us, though.
Guaranteed work.
Yeah.
But I guess I came from a world of no owner supply equipment as such, EPC contract. And there, we had to engineer it, go buy it, construct it at some point in time. And I think in those days, which is not that long ago, but quite a way ago, technology was not as moving as fast as it is now in those types of things. It's a different world again.
I think it depends too on how involved the owner is in managing the equipment. Like, we have a lot of electrical equipment that the owner doesn't have anything to do with, like all of our industrial programming, PLCs and all of that equipment. We buy that because the owner doesn't actively manage it, but their IT department, they want to be able to, install Windows updates and manage their, network infrastructure and stuff. So that's why they're providing that equipment, but anything else where it's kind of hands-off black box solution for them, they don't really care as much. That makes sense.
Great. Any last questions before we wrap up? Obviously, like usual, where everyone's welcome to hang around and continue to talk. I just want to let people who are, would like to leave. Any final thoughts? All right. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate you guys' time. Yeah. Thanks, Sean, for recruiting 2 people to be on the panel, pulling your weight as a board member. Thank you.
Almost like we always can work together.
Yeah. So thanks, guys. Before you leave, we got a little certificate for everyone. So certificate of achievement.
Excellent.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, they're in the corner right there.
Oh.
Yeah, good job.
Gotta get a picture for our LinkedIn here.
Yeah, that's okay.
Oh,
There you go.
like if you didn't post about it, did it even happen?
Right. All the cool stuff we're doing.
We don't have, but we want this.
Right here's fine.
Work on the middle.
Better.
Oh, no.
Come on, Jason, you gotta get it. Oh, that's the sharpest now. There we go. And got it. Okay.
Cool.
Now, if you don't put that directly above your head in your office.
Right next to your degree.
I'd ignore my degree.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone online.
Say goodbye to people online.
Okay. All right. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining online. Have a great night.
Thank you.